Commissioner, come on up.
All right, you got me live? All right. Thank you, Chairman and members, for getting us first on the billing today, early in the morning. I've noticed our Chairman likes early morning meetings. That's that South Georgia in you, right?
Well, partially South Georgia, and it's when you can get committee members to come in because the afternoons seem to be packed.
Well, I like it too. First of all, I guess what I want to do is just kind of highlight the changes, and then y'all got a handout and try to go through that really quickly. So first we'll look at your tracking sheet. There's really only two changes to our budget this time. You're going to see, just like we had in the amended budget, you're going to see again the transfer of the funds for regulation of youth employment from unemployment over to workforce solutions, which is the proper area for that to be in. All it is a transfer of funds because that's where that unit is operating in anyway. So something we've requested for several years, and it's glad to see that finally being put in the right place. The other change that you'll see is there is an enhancement on the budget on 31.4.4 of just less than $400,000. That is for a new program that we have called Customized Recruitment. It's been around for a little over a year. It's a program that we developed to assist economic development in their task in attracting new companies to Georgia, and I'm going to go through and explain that when we go through the sheets real quick. Matter of fact, we even have a short video today that'll give you some testimonials that you'll hear from some of the companies that we've helped through different placements with customized recruitment. If you'll take a look on that first page of our handout, it just shows you a little small pile chart to start off with that shows where most of our funds come from. As you see, most of our funds are federal. We do have some collected funds, which is at almost 12.5 million. Most of that is from the AA funds, which come from that percentage that through legislation that we collect to help with administration that comes on the collection of the taxes. And again, the budget changes are on the second page. It highlights those. It also shows some for the very first time in that some of the folks that have worked at the Department of Labor for a very long time in finance can even remember. We finally have some bonds in here, and these are much needed projects. We have a parking deck over next to our office that our employees use that is very old. The building that we're in actually is 50 years old. The second building, which IT is in, is nearly as old, and I'm going to assume that parking deck is getting pretty close to that age too. It's starting to show some wear and tear. We're wanting to get an assessment. We already know there's going to have to be some repairs done. We don't want it to get to the point to where it deteriorates to where we have to do a tear down, because that could get very expensive, obviously. So we want to go in there and make those repairs before they get even worse. And right now is that time of year when you have a lot of the rain, the water, freezing, things like that. It's a concrete deck. You can even have even more damage. We also have multiple facility repairs that need to be done. We have a lot of owned property around the state. We have around 16 or 17 owned properties outside of the main campus that have different repairs that are way behind on things like upgrading our restrooms, ADA compliant, air conditioning units, carpeting, things that have gotten way beyond the time of their useful life. That next slide gives you some information about the regulation of youth, gives you some stats about the work permits that we have done in some of the areas that we do with for the youth program. So as the next slide also shows you those labor inspection stats. That has a lot to do with different complaints that we receive that we actually have to send people out on site to take a look at what's going on to see if there is any kind of violations, make sure we're keeping our children that are working safe. We do have some legislation that Chairman Hamilton is working on that is going to change some of the youth labor laws. It's when it comes to certifications, which will give our employees some relief and allow them to do more of the inspections and do more of the work that we need them to be doing. Right now we're processing, as you saw in those earlier slides, a lot of permits. And quite frankly, a lot of people are not even doing this, and it's really hard to track and keep up with. The federal government quit requiring permits for child labor many years ago, and it's just something we've never caught up to reflect the changes in the federal law. So we're hoping that you'll look at that favorably when you see that come before you on the floor of the House, or if you're in that committee. Now, customized recruitment. This is the enhancement that we were talking about. As you'll see on that slide, we have done a lot of work in this area. In a nutshell, basically what it does is we work with economic development after they identify a prospect, and during the recruitment process, we bring some value add. And how we do that is, one of the things that we have noticed, not just in Georgia but in other states, a lot of these companies spend a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort to try to get staffed up. And sometimes it can take them a very long time depending on where they are. Now, the problem with that, if you have a company that comes into your area, and let's say that it takes them a very long time to get fully staffed up, that can hurt you. And how that will hurt you is if when that next company comes into your area to start looking around to see whether or not they want to locate in your area, if the experience of the previous companies that have recently located finding talent is bad, they will pass your area over. And so we've brought this program on board in order to help that recruitment process, to get it done quicker. We basically come in for a very short period of time on the very front end when these companies are just starting up, to help them go out and recruit and find the talent and get them in place as quickly as possible. This is especially helpful to these new companies because they don't have those established relationships in the communities like a current company would. Most companies that are already there, they already have almost kind of a recruitment arm in place. They have their current employees that know people that are looking. They also have relationships, tight relationships with their chamber and also with recruiting firms that are already in those communities. These new companies, they don't have those type of relationships. They don't understand the community. They don't know what to look for. We're there to assist them with that. And with that, I would like to show you this real short video. And I'll apologize to the committee right off the bat. The music that's in the background of this is half as old as our IT computer systems. It's probably somewhere along the 80s. So it's, as one of my staff members says, it sounds like the music from an after-school special.
This program, the Department of Labor offered us, really helped us because we were on a fast-track timeline. We came down here, and I think it was somewhere around September that we decided that we were going to come to Georgia. And so we're not even a year into it now, and we're already in production. So setting that, having that kind of pace. If we would have had to have brought all of our people from Kansas City down here to do all the hiring, the staffing, everything, it just would have been a huge task. And the Department of Labor was willing to work with us and work with us on our timeline. We were down here for basically 3 months, and we started hiring, and hiring for full-time production people, and they were able to meet our needs. I've been here 6 months now, and we've already been running production for 90 days. Holding that timeline was, seemed almost impossible coming down here. But, you know, working with the Department of Labor and them bringing in so many qualified candidates is really what helped us keep our timeline. You know, I've never come across anything like that before. I think it saved us a ton of money and time because they interviewed them for us. They had our job descriptions, and they did a really good job of narrowing down the field. So the interviews that we did do were actually productive. They were people that we wanted in front of us. They were actually people we wanted to see.
Well, first of all, I just really want to say that this is an exciting day for me as an entrepreneur and as an employer. You know, it's one thing to have a dream to own your own business, but it's another thing when the dream comes to reality and you see hundreds of people that are coming in that are seeking employment. I think this is a good day for DeKalb County, and I think this is a great day as well for the city of Dunwoody. Who's going to be working for me at the end of the day? I am. I love it. And also a great day for us as entrepreneurs to have a Department of Labor that does this for business owners for free. I want to just concentrate on that word free today because to come in and do something of this caliber and level of excellence for us as business owners is absolutely the most beneficial assets that I think we've ever experienced from any state government.
So basically what you guys would do is catch the inbound call. And
all those different areas, we were able to get quality employees and hire them, and now expect to start within the next few weeks to begin to generate capital in this campaign that will grow to this entire floor to 100 and some employees at the same time. So we're pretty excited, and we appreciate the Department of Labor for doing that. You know, when we find out as businesses that this type of support exists, I'm sure that everybody will want to move to the state of Georgia, you know, and be a part of Georgia and the team that came. Because as a small business, you have so many things that you're working with. And for a body of the state to come in and help you in your most critical area, which is labor, is a godsend for us as TopTail USA as a company. So it made it easy for us to get the employees that we needed in front of us. And the screening process, you know how long it would have took us to go through 300 plus applicants or that show up? It would have been tough. But what you all did was screen them and then sent us the best of the best and gave us an opportunity to interview those after you took them through the screening process. That is priceless.
From the very first day, the Department of Labor and Elizabeth Scott were at the table with Quick Start and the Economic Development team. On that first day, they offered us the customized recruitment program so that we could start to staff our plant. The customized recruitment team was very accessible. They partnered with us. They listened to what we needed. They made it easy for us to recruit the people that we needed for our plant. They did all of the work. They advertised. They worked with local resources to set up the events. We really just had to show up, and they screened all the candidates for us and then supplied us with qualified talent. So it's a good change from the old style Department of Labor recruiting, I think, that most employers are used to in the state of Georgia. Every business is in business to make money, and when you're recruiting professional people, it costs money, 20 to 30% of their annual salary. And the customized recruitment is free. It's a free service from the Department of Labor, so bottom line is cost savings.
Lisa Atkinson came and talked to us about this new program that Commissioner Butler had started, and it sounded very interesting. So we began to work with her, began to work with the folks in her task force, and they were just great in customizing what we needed. They tried to meet our needs and that type of thing, and now we've got it underway. And we've actually started just last week interviewing the first folks out of the results, and they have done the initial screening, and they're providing us candidates. And what we're seeing now, not as many candidates, but higher quality candidates. So we're pretty excited about this program. I think it's something that we've needed for a long time. It's something the industry needs, whether you're coming in new to the area or you're expanding like we are. This is really a good program. If the Department of Labor was not stepping in and doing what they're doing for us now through this new process, I would have to have more people, and more people is more money. And then once I'm through, what I do with those people, you know. So it does affect our bottom line. It saves us money. I mean, it's like having a staff that's working for us, and then once we're complete, then, you know, I don't need those resources quite as much. Now going forward, I think we'll always use this task force as we continue through our hiring process. You know, the service that Commissioner Butler has started is something that they did not have before. And this service, yeah, I feel like we're getting what we pay for now in taxes, our unemployment insurance, and those type things. You know, that is a real value to us. We were paying it before, but we didn't have the service. Now we're still paying the same thing, but we got a great service to go along with it.
It's kind of hard to top what somebody else can say that, you know. Of course, now that last one got Toyota, that was one of our first ones that we did when we were trying to learn how to do what we were doing. We typically don't help existing industry anymore unless it's an extremely large expansion where they're adding on, because we don't want to be in the business of competing with staffing agencies, but we do want to help economic development. As you all know, we're not like other states where you can write a large check, basically what they call closing money on a deal. This gives value add that we can show to a company, which would be the equivalent of writing a check, sometimes as much as $250,000. Now, quickly, I know time's running short. You got some other folks to get to, but I know that everybody here is probably interested in the UI Trust Fund, where we are. That's on a couple slides over. It shows our current balance today at $475 million. I think this one's 10, if you can see that lightly colored 10 on that handout. It didn't go through as good as we thought it would. And if you're like me, I need reading glasses, so my print on mine is a lot bigger. All right. This is just a couple slides that briefly show you where we are with our trust fund, benefits paid, how that's changed over the years, and also the amount of money in the trust fund. We have come a long way from where we were 4 years ago to where we were close to $1 billion in the hole. We're well on our way to becoming solvent. Matter of fact, on the next slide, you'll see what our projected balance is at the end of this year. We should have around $800 million in that fund at the end of the year. Our projections are that possibly by 2018 we should be completely solvent, and by that time, and at that time, we would be able to remove the surcharge on the state unemployment tax. And then one last slide I'd like to show you about one of the things that we've been doing to help with that. We have recreated and strengthened our fraud, waste, and abuse sections at Department of Labor. And you've got a small explanation of those, talking about sides, our fraud and abuse reporting website, and also our new cross match, that way we can make sure that nobody who's incarcerated is getting unemployment. And also we found out that people are getting very high tech when it comes to making internet claims. Sometimes you can even have them coming from stolen identities from overseas. We have a new system in place that captures those and finds those. And just in 2014, we recovered over $25 million in fraud, waste, and abuse, which was a new record for the Department of Labor. So with time running short, that is the major parts of our presentation. We've left you a few other pages in here to give you some other background on the Department of Labor for your reading. But with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take those.
We do have a question. Chairman Martin.
Thank you, Chairman Carter. I have a couple. No, Chairman Carter, Commissioner Butler. I'm getting there. Chairman Smith to our. Yes. I have questions in two different areas. The first one, if I could, you mentioned the bonds about the building, and this may be when we get to the Georgia Building Authority later, but I'm unclear. Do you not pay the Georgia Building Authority for rent on the building, or no, you're in a building that you do not do that?
We own those buildings.
I understand that. We own the state capitol, but in the building the judiciary's in, but the rents are paid through to the GBA in various cases, and they maintain
the buildings that we have right now are in the Department of Labor's name, bought with federal
Okay, so you
funds.
deal with okay. That was my question. I was just wondering why we were doing bonds for you, and they
You can get in some
clears that
very, you can get in a lot more complicated situation when you start moving some of that around, because of the fact that that building was paid for with 100% federal
I
funds.
understand. That's why I was asking if we were in that situation. That if I may, on the new program, two questions. You said you've been around for a year, but we're funding it now. How did you fund it previously?
Well, the reason why you're not actually funding the program. This is just for an enhancement to add to it. Right now, the program has become so popular with economic development. I believe we currently have on our calendar going forward 35 prospects. Now maybe low on that. At one time, it may be a little bit higher, but going forward, we only have 4 full-time employees that work in this program, and then at different recruitments, depending on where they are in the state, we actually pull individuals out of our career centers and borrow them for that short period of time when they're helping with that new company do the startup. Now, what we have to do, because of how the federal funding is set up, it's all granted and it can only be used for specific purposes. So when we take that employee that may have been being paid out of the UI grant, or maybe being paid out of Wagner Pizer, we can't use that money to pay them for the time that they're going to be working on that event. So we have to have these funds, which are a lot more flexible, because this is not a program that you're going to see the feds, at least not at this time, come in and back or give us money to run. So we need to expand our full-time personnel and also have additional monies for travel. It's very travel intensive, because we do move individuals from, like for example, when we did either that project in Macon or projects in Dalton or project in North Georgia, we may be pulling specialized personnel as far away as from Savannah.
All right, so I get it. So the increase to just under 400, 398 is an increase. How much are you spending on the program now?
It's really kind of hard to put an exact number on it, because it shifts so much during the year, because it's depending, and it's actually keeps increasing, but it's several million.
Yeah, if I can, I mean, I know this is going to sound hard-cased on this thing, but one of the gentlemen said in there, yeah, and it's free. It's not free. It's free to them. It's costing somebody money, and I have a pause with it that we continue to do things and we don't track what they are. So I would love to know. I think it's important to get our hands around what it costs, what the state taxpayer is spending on those things. Because you also said you were concerned and keeping an eye on not getting into the area of competing with recruiting services and private businesses out there. We're trying to do it. You're trying to work with them as opposed to replace them. I think I heard you say that. Mm-hmm. But I just think it's important, because I mean we're we went through those budget times. You were sitting in a different chair, alongside me, down in 245 in 06, 07, 08, when we went through those tough budget times. Budget times are getting better, but when it goes into a big bucket and it just gets paid for and it feels good, and it may have a great benefit, but I think unless we know exactly what it costs, it's hard to determine the benefit, because if somebody's getting something and somebody else is paying for it, of course it's a great deal. I would expect them to have great things to say about it, and it may be a great program to do. I guess my question is, at what cost? How much did we spend hiring 40, or I think one of the gentlemen said 130 positions? How much did the state taxpayers spend helping them hire 130 positions? If it was $130,000, $1,000 a position, maybe that's a good deal. If it was 3 times that, maybe not so much. But right now, I think sitting before the committee, we wouldn't know like how much you spent on each individual project to know what the cost benefit was. Would we?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was asking, you know, so how much does it cost now? And if, Madam Chair, we don't have to get that, but maybe, you know, at a later time offline
I think, Brooke Lucas, who's here, who's one of the people who helps run the program.
Sure.
She can give you a little bit better insight on that.
just
okay.
depending on Chairman Carter, what our time frame is. I'm happy to get it offline if we need to.
Yeah. And we can get some more precise numbers for you. But the truth is, this program was born out of the Business Services Unit, which is required by the Wagner-Pizer grant that we get from the feds to perform some of these services already. Technically, we're running very, very lean because these people that do this particular program are also doing lots of other things to get unemployed people back to work as well. However, we can break it down, I think, and get a number for you that shows exactly how much each of the events that we've done so far for economic development, what that number is.
Yeah, and of course, you know, not down to the penny, you know, if that makes, but down something that I think is reasonable, because it's easier to show, because there's some people that are getting this. I mean, by definition, there's some people that are getting this help. There are other people that are not getting this help, and they may well be at companies that are competing with one another. So if we spend a couple $100,000 to have a company do this, and their competitor doesn't, we've created an unfair, you know, situation. Thank you.
And I'd like to briefly add, you know, we already kind of had that same scenario every time we recruit a new company to Georgia. You know, they get special treatment based upon us bringing them here, whereas somebody else who is a competitor may not be getting that right now. But it's part of that competitive process. And if we don't do things like this to bring companies to Georgia, I mean, you know, it makes us less competitive. And so it's got to, you know, we have to determine where we want to be in that, you know, competitive process. Do we want to let, you know, I know for a fact that other states have noticed this program, because I was on the phone just in the last few months with my counterpart in South Carolina. And we were talking, just doing a lot of little small talk, and finally she popped up and said, hey, so tell me about this customized recruitment program that you guys have down in Georgia. And the only reason why she would know about it is if some economic developer up there had heard about it, or some prospect that was looking at us in South Carolina looked at it and was like, hey, where's your customized recruitment program?
And if I may, just to follow up, Commissioner, you make my point exactly. You know, governments, you know, Texas, you know, Governor Perry out there had the oil money, and he was paying people to come from California to Texas. You know, at some point, you know, if we do this and then everybody else does this, that means the taxpayers of all 50 states are paying for this, and it means we've got to do one more thing to get them. At some point, we're getting government more and more and more in. You know, we try to create a competitive advantage, then everybody around us does it, so then we have to do something else. And at some point, I think we just got to be careful about getting government in doing things that business ought to budget to do for themselves. For instance, you can provide this service for them, and maybe they help you pay for 10% of it or 20% of it, a third of it. It's less than the 100% they would have to pay if they did it on your own, because the one gentleman in there said, look, if I had to do this, I would have to hire a group of people to help me get up, and then what would I do with those people? So it's a service to them if they just had to, you know, contribute a little bit to the process. I mean, we're not going to get to that today, but I do worry about economic incentives and economic development, that at some point, you know, business is great, we're going out of business if we keep, you know, having, you know, paying people to come here, and then South Carolina matches us, so we have to up our offer, and they up theirs, and we up ours some more. I mean, we've created that situation in some industries across the country. Ask the state of Texas.
Right, well, we do the same thing with Quick Start.
Don't disagree.
Also.
You're
but
right.
In my case, I don't really view it the same way, because I feel like the taxpayers have already paid for this service. They're finally getting some service for the monies they're paying. You take a look at the amount of money that we get that's referred to as state funds in here. Those are actually collected funds. Those are not coming from other sources of revenue. Those are sources of revenue, or revenue that we generate, the Department of Labor. Matter of fact, last year we generated $28 million to come into the state. And we're only getting back less than 14 million of that 20, less than half. So we're already generating the money to fund programs like this and others. We're just showing you that we can do some value add that can do an assistance, and economic development is very high on this program because it is giving us a competitive edge, and it's helping us bring companies here to Georgia. So I hope you would look favorably on the program.
And again, same thing. I'm just saying, if it's that much of a value to them, if they paid for 20% of the cost, that means you could do it for 20% more people. right? I mean, if you had companies that matched you and you were helping. Right now, if you didn't do this, they would have to pay for it all somehow, assuming they still came here, and it's a valid assumption that some might not. All I'm saying is if at some point it's such a value that they contributed some money toward doing it, then you might be able to take the program and do it to others. It's just really a thought of at what point, you know, you run it. You can't do it for everybody, so at some point you run out of money. If it's a great value, it would seem that it would be, you know, a value to the companies to provide, but we can talk about that further.
Okay. Thank you. Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner. Thank you and Deputy Commissioner for being here today and putting up with all of our questions. And half the time I don't know what I'm talking about, but you never try to embarrass me, and I appreciate that. Going back to this thing that Chairman Martin's talking about, this is for startups only. And is any particular size company that actually is required to get the benefits?
We're actually working with economic development right now. As you know, Quick Start requires only 15 new employees to use their services.
Right.
Economic development has realized that based on resource constraints, we're trying to figure out where we put that number for new job creation. But we are in discussion about that right now. So far, we haven't put a number on it, but we definitely are planning to.
Well, I'd love to have that number whenever you know, just for my own personal knowledge, so that if we come across a company, that we could let them know that it's available. And I understand Chairman Martin's concern about the cost. Did I hear you say that this is mostly federal money?
No.
No. State money?
Yes.
Okay. So there's no match or anything with this?
We don't get a match.
Oh, of any kind. Okay. All right. The other thing, I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind, but I'll try to rush through them if you don't mind, Madam Chair. Well, I'm of the opinion that any good business always has to stay one step ahead of your competitor. And if you're going to stay one step ahead of your competitor, it takes things like this to keep us ahead of our competitors. And once they match us, guess what? Then we got to move on to the next thing. So this sounds like a very good program, but the only question I'd have is, because I am so much pro-business individually, that is there ever been any consideration to maybe outsourcing this and taking bids on it or something rather than doing it in-house?
Actually, another discussion we're in right now with Quick Start, they're kind of helping us learn how they manage their process as well. As new companies come in and it ebbs and flows, obviously, they actually use independent contractors to support the Quick Start process. Obviously, we're so small right now that's not necessary, but that is one of the things that Quick Start does, and we're looking at how that works.
So you hadn't taken that off the table. That's something you may look at?
Possibly.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Representative White. Sorry. There we go.
Commissioner Butler, listening to my two friends here, first of all, I support what you're doing. I think it's a good program. I'm of the belief that, you know, the old saying, you pay now or pay later. You know, we served on a committee together some years ago where we toured prisons, and we saw how much money was being spent in the corrections department. And I guess I could ask the question, how much of that money came back to us? I just don't believe much of that money came back. You know, that was money, or is money, that's being wasted. And I believe money here is saved and prevent money from being wasted there. So I believe this is a good program. It attracts businesses to the state. It employs people and keep them out of the prison systems. I think it's a positive program. And I don't want to prolong this because I know we have a lot to talk about, but I would like to say that I am a supporter of your program. I think it's a good one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate your time this morning. And next up, we have the Commissioner of Department of Natural Resources. And members, we are on page 18 in on our tracking sheet, which is section 33.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I don't have a nice video. I got a good picture of a buck I killed this year. Thank you for having us this morning. I was going to highlight some our FY16 budget requests. I won't go through every single division, but we do have statewide changes for the merit-based pay increase and the fringe benefits that go with that, insurance and such. So I'll start on line 3664, and you'll see a continuation. And when we did the F-15, it was 166,000 of our. You got it? 33. My numbers again wrong. Okay. 33.6. All right. You'll see a continuation of our law enforcement. We moved 4 field positions and 4 other positions over to the FY16 budget. On line 3374, you'll see where our Parks Division is receiving payments from the North Georgia Mountain Authority. This was for renovations we did with Amicalola Falls, Unicoi Falls, Lake Blackshear, and George T. Bagby. And on line 33, I'm sorry. My notes are wrong. 3376, you will see where our state dollars are being put in to offset bond obligations in our state parks and historic sites division. I'll sort of stop there. We were receiving payments for years on bond repayments of about $2.1 million to offset some of the budget cuts that parks went through several years ago. Those all stopped. So what we're requesting is a state appropriation of $793,500, and then a replacement in FY16 for the North Georgia Mountains Authority. When they start repaying these bonds, instead of going it to the general treasury, it goes back to us of $771,800. Obviously, those 2 figures don't fill that hole of $2.1 million, but it gets us closer. This is not increasing a budget; it's trying to hold one together as best we can. So we would request that. And then in FY16, we are asking for an enhancement to our non-game program of $300,000, and you can see that on 3394. And I'll stop there for questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Carter. Always interesting to me when numbers are around like 300,000. What specifically are you going to do? I mean,
I got you.
That's not a specific position.
I can make it 300,001.
No, you understand. I mean, just so real quick. I mean, that's an increase in funds. What do you got in mind to do with money?
Our non-game program, is funded. It's never had a state appropriation.
Right.
And so we've got about 121 species in this state alone that are up for federal listing. Mainly on the horizon is the gopher tortoise that would affect land use and economic development and recreation use, quite frankly, coming up in 2018. This is not to add any positions. This is to enhance. We feel like we're taking good care of these species, but it takes a lot of money to prove that we are to Fish and Wildlife Service. So we fund it through the Weekend for Wildlife that we just had, income tax checkoff, and then our tag bill. And we appreciate y'all reversing the formula for us last year. We don't have great numbers yet, but we know that's increasing. So this is not adding positions. It just helps us enhance. We've got a lot of work to do between now and 2018.
Again, not for that, but I mean, again, I'd like to know what we're doing. I mean, I understand it's not new positions, but you can if it's to fulfill federal paperwork, if it's to do programs to do
all
it.
Of that.
Maybe offline we can
all
get
of that, and this 300 helps us. It will help us draw down 900,000 in federal dollars as well.
Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And that was the point I was going to bring up, that the amount you'd be able to draw down federally, but also if you don't maintain this program, and Chairman Martin, I think I'm right on this, the federal government will come in and take it over, will they not?
Well, yes. The listing is federal.
Yes.
And so they rely on the states.
Right.
Fish and Wildlife relies on the states to prove to them that they're taking care of these species. So.
And is it not true that we also have cut your budget since 2009 by how much? About probably around 35–40% now?
Pretty close. Anywhere from 28 to 32.
Well, and I don't know that there's any other agency that has been whacked like yours has and took the abuse that you have, and I appreciate the job you're doing and all your people, because nobody in your department I ever hear complain, but you get a lot of abuse because you can't get to everything you need to get to, but I appreciate what y'all do.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the members? Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you, ma'am.
EPD is up next with Mary Walker, the Assistant Director, and members, we are also on page 18. Okay. Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Mary Walker. This is Trip Addison. We're happy to be here. Director Turner is sorry he is in jury duty today, and very sorry that he is not here. Our section starts on section 33.3 with Environmental Protection Program. I will skip the first three items, which are just statewide adjustments for merit raises, ERS, and DOAS, and move to 33.3.4. This item transfers $232,000 from Soil and Water Conservation Commission to EPD. The governor's budget overall is transferring functions and funding for soil and water to the Department of Agriculture and to EPD. This is the result of a ZBB analysis that the OPB undertook over the last couple of years, and I think you may recall there was some discussion on some of this last year as well. This year's budget recommendation transfers two functions to EPD. That is the water resources and land use planning function of soil and water, and that is really the data analysis and reporting of water use data that soil and water has. And the second program it transfers to EPD is the USDA flood control structures, and that is really oversight of the state-owned dams. There continues to be some discussion on this issue in terms of like the best alignment of functions and how this would happen, and a bill may follow. We will just follow the lead of the Governor and General Assembly on this issue. The next item is 33.3.5, which is continued funding for the regional water plan updates and for water-related studies. Y'all recall in 2011 we did the first round of regional water plans. Last year you gave us the first increment of funding for the updates of those plans, which are due in 2016. This would be allowing us to retain those funds so we can continue the second year of funding. In our current year's budget, we're doing the data and technical work that is kind of the underpinning of the plans. And in the fiscal 16 budget, we'll finish the data and technical work up, and we'll have funding for the council support. So as those councils really start to meet and do the work of updating the plans. And then finally, there's a little bit of funding in there for location-specific water studies. And our last environmental protection program item is to direct us to use existing money to add 5 positions to our Safe Dams unit. The Georgia Safe Dams Act gives EPD responsibilities for dam oversight. We're required to inventory all the dams in the state every 5 years, and then to classify them based on the risk that they pose to human life. For Category 1 dams, which are dams where if they fail, there would be a risk of life, a loss of life, we are required to permit those and make sure they're constructed to a standard that would protect the life that's beneath them. We have been operating for years in this program with really substantial backlogs, and at this point, probably certainly more than half of the Category 1 structures in the state are unpermitted. And we have backlogs really at every stage of the game that are keeping us from getting those dams permitted. We've spent a lot of time thinking about how to skin this cat. It is concerning because, as you probably know, many of the dams in Georgia are older earthen structures. And given the increasing frequency of sort of severe storms, it is concerning, and we need to make sure that these structures where life is at risk are appropriately constructed. So we will be shifting our program focus to focus on getting those dams permitted, but we also will be using these additional 5 staff, which we'll hire with existing funds to help us get through the backlog. That concludes EPD. We have 2 other items in DNR, and that is 33.4 and 33.8, the hazardous waste trust fund and the solid waste trust fund. And the governor's budget recommends no changes to those items.
All right, we have a question. Oh, I'm sorry.
I
Go
have
ahead.
one last thing, and
Okay.
we're not used to this because this is a bond and we're new at this. In the capital outlay section, there is a $3 million recommendation for bonds for Palmetto Creek Watershed Structure Number 1. This is the rehab of this structure. This is one of those soil and water dams, state-owned dams, an old NRCS structure in Harris County. It does need to be addressed because there are 3 significant roads below it. There are 7 residential structures, and there's a city water treatment plant. So this rehabilitation will help us prevent a loss of life or a major property damage in the event of a failure. Okay.
Thank you. Chairman Smith.
Thank you. I beat Chairman Martin. I can't believe it. Thank you also for your presentation. There's, in my community several years ago, there was a dam built that was a Class 2 dam, but unbeknownst to the impact of this legislation, our local zoning board approved a house to be built downstream, which immediately turned it from a Class 2 to a Class 1 dam, which meant it had to meet all the higher requirements. And so from that I learned there's such an educational component to the Safe Dams Act. We have so many nice developments in our urban areas that are enjoying the amenities of the dam but have no control over it. So I hope when you're going through all of this, there's also an educational component. And also by way of telling you, I was able to get the rule changed. Please don't ever change this rule that you have to post what your Class 2 and Class 1 dams are where people are researching property deeds. So I found that to be an invaluable tool.
Thank you. We agree, actually. Dams are one of the harder things that we deal with because the owner of the dam could be required to upgrade based on development downstream.
With no knowledge of what these decisions are making.
Right. I have been out to speak to the municipal association. We will talk to the counties, and we are actually going to have a stakeholder meeting later in the month. We really need to, even though it is required that counties notify EPD and the dam owner when those rezonings occur, it may not always be happening. And so we know we need to improve our communication with the county so that they know what's required so that we don't have any more of these kind of challenging situations develop. We're starting those conversations now.
What I found with local governments is that they look and see it's a Class 2 dam, but they don't understand their action moves it to a Class 1 dam, and I found that to be a huge impediment, and it's a problem occurring in all of our urban areas and even some of our rural areas. So thank you for that attention. I'm very pleased to see that we are funding the regional water plans. That's going to make our state move forward with local government input. That's why it's so key. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Martin.
Thank you. You actually broached the subject I was going to ask a question about. So basically we have a situation of if 40 years ago I built a lake. Some of these actually watershed lakes I think were built in the late 60s. Well, I mean some in the 30s. I saw you move your website, but I mean there was a whole nother round of them that went around in the 60s. If I'm around the state, so those dams could have been built as Class 2 dams. Somebody could then develop neighborhoods below them and make could be the state, could be the property owner upgrade without any nothing that the current property owner of the dam could do, and that is required by state law or federal law. I mean, it seems like that's almost a inadvertent taking of somebody's property, and that's not, we won't debate that here, but is that something that we should not take a look at if it's a state law?
Well, what I think the law that is currently in place, it is a challenging situation when that happens. I think the law that I think Representative Smith may have put in place years ago is to require the county, the municipality to notify the dam owner and EPD when the development downstream is happening. So I think at that moment would be when you factor in any considerations. As you're zoning that development downstream, you ought to think about the fact that you're in a floodplain and any costs that are associated with that dam upgrade ought to be built into the process right now. We end up in trouble when that didn't happen, and we have to go out. Yeah.
Right, it ought to be, but there's nothing in law that requires. There's not like an impact fee. I'm careful to okay. All right. Question just about your bond. I found it back on the rehabilitation of the flood control structure.
Yeah.
Hamilton. All right. So this is money that is needed to design and do this thing. You're not in the dam building business, so how will this actually take place? Will you go through the procurement folks at the state, and they'll do a bid for a vendor, and you're just basically the conduit for the bond funds here?
Right. We do not physically upgrade the dam ourselves. We would contract the construction work out.
Okay, but and that'll be through the regular purchasing.
Yeah.
Last question, relative to the two funds you mentioned, the Solid Waste Trust Fund and the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund. Those, one or both of those collect fees in various places, and I know you got that, the infamous tire fund. I have for years, and Chairman Powell did, a step toward that a few years ago, but it still bothers me that we're charging those fees, and you're not getting all the money for the fees into that. I just want to go on record as that's money. Commissioner Butler mentioned what they generated, whatever, but these are specifically dedicated funds in these cases. Do you have enough money budgeted in these funds, these hazardous waste and the one we have, the solid waste, to do the things you want to do in the next fiscal year? I mean, I know there's only so much you can say grace over, if you will. I mean, we could throw you a lot more money. You can't be in all places at once, but do you have enough money to move forward? Because I'm pretty sure there's money owed to these funds if you could use more of them.
We don't have full reappropriation, but I will say, like in the Solid Waste Trust Fund last year, we received an additional $850,000. And so this year, in fiscal 15 and in fiscal 16, we have slightly over $1 million for scrap tire cleanups. And we have a backlog of around about, we expect, $2 million worth of cleanup. So we do believe that with this, we really appreciate that substantial increase in funding and think that that is very helpful. Certainly there are abandoned landfills we could address, but we do think that with that increase, that was very, very helpful in terms of helping us get through the backlog.
But in this upcoming fiscal year, I mean, in other words, more money would not necessarily mean you could do more things this year. You've kind of got all you can manage to do. Is that a fair statement or not?
That's a hard question to answer. Certainly there are other items that could be addressed.
Right.
But we do, I think Director Turner very clearly, we are of the mind that an incremental increase of these funds allows us to kind of gear back up after many years of not having appropriations. We believe we can demonstrate to you the value of the funds. So I think we have a sufficient amount of funding.
Okay, and that wasn't a question about taking, and my question is actually, could you use more and actually put them to work this year? And I know I've put you in enough of an awkward position, given you an executive branch department, so I'll leave it at that for this point.
Representative Dickey. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
A brief clarification here. It's a dual system to get into these programs, and you get applications from the cities and the counties first. So they have their due diligence, and then that's the county component of it. So when there wasn't money there wasn't activity, and the activity is starting to increase now. So by next year, I fully expect you to come back asking for more.
Right, we do expect, absolutely. And on the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund side, certainly we have $58 million worth of abandoned site cleanups, but we do have a little increment of funding, and we're going to clean up and build back. Okay.
Thank you.
Representative Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll apologize for getting here late earlier. But anyway, I just wanted to reiterate what Chairman Smith said about the water councils. I've been on a water council since the inception, and I think they've been very, very positive, and I'm glad to see us continuing with those. I think they do a lot of benefits in a lot of ways, so thank you for that.
Thank you. We appreciate your support.
My only comment.
Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a tire recycling company down in Milan, Georgia, which is on the borderline between Dodge and Telfair County, and they would take the old tires and make them into some mats or something like that. That type of business is one way of cleaning up the tires. Is that not correct?
Yeah.
And you would probably really appreciate a company like that being in the state of Georgia to help with that situation. Well, they closed 2 weeks ago and moved to Ohio. And I don't know if we got any others in the state or not. And is there a shortage of companies like that to help get these tires out of the woods and off the roads and pick them up from the dealers and things like that? is there enough companies to adequately take the tires that are coming in annually that are out there, or we have other ways of dispose of them?
We require that all the tires that are cleaned up through the trust fund be reprocessed and repurposed in some manner, not just dumped in a landfill. I am not aware of a shortage of facilities to handle those, but that may be something I might have to get back to.
Well, I was just shocked. You know, we have very little employment where I live. You know, as you know, Telfair was listed as one of the 7 poorest counties in the United States, and that's where this plant was located. And it was sad to us. It was on 15 jobs, but I still hated to see them go for the job purposes, but also hated to see them go because of the tires that they were actually consuming. But I'd like to know if we have other companies, and if so, how many, and how many tires we're generating, and how many tires are we actually recycling through Georgia companies.
Okay.
Thank you.
Get that for you, sure.
Chairman Martin.
Sure. No, you're not. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Secretary Kemp. Good morning. Members are on page 26.
Good morning, everyone. Got Lori Smith here with me, who helps us with our operations and budget and a lot of other things. You want me to just
go for
have that? Okay, first of all, let me just say again that we appreciate the governor and the Office of Planning and Budget for their recommendations for the 2016 budget. First, starting in corporations, which on the tracking sheet is page 82, line 42.1.1. As you all know, the Corporations Division is a great investment for our state. In 2014, the Corporations Division was budgeted a little over $1.2 million in state funds, and we remitted almost $50 million to the state treasury in corporation filing fees. We certainly expect more of the same this year on a budget of just $40,000 in state funds. The addition that we have under the corporations program this year on 42.1.3 of $873,351 is helping restoring funding for general operating expenses, which was covered by one-time money in 2015. Just so you all know, our salaries currently in the corporations division run about $1.8 million, and our operations is another $1.2 million. The rest of the recommendations under corporations are all these statewide adjustments. In the elections division, which is on 42.2.1, we've got the increase of $280,612. This is just a continuation from the addition in the mid-year budget, so we certainly appreciate you all's support. Just to remind you, those positions were a junior attorney, a military liaison, and then 2 dedicated investigators for elections. The rest is statewide adjustments. In our investigation division, which is 42.3.1, through the zero-based budget process that we went through this year with the OPB, there was a recommendation that came out which we support to transfer our investigations from the administrative program into its own program. As you know, this is a full-service law enforcement division that we have within the Secretary of State's office. Post-certified law enforcement investigators which support the entire office and agency investigating anything from voter fraud to unlicensed contractors and securities cases. So the addition there on the line 42.3.5 of a little over $2.6 million, that is not new money. That's just a transfer from our administrative program to investigations, and then the rest are just statewide adjustments. In the administration program, which is line 42.4.1, the only transfers in administration are the transfer of the investigations, which I just discussed, to its own program. and then the Georgia Athletic and Entertainment Commission, which probably most people better know as the Boxing Commission. Also, as a result of the zero-based budget process, it was recommended that we move the one employee we have that handles the work for that to our licensing division, because that's basically what they're doing, is licensing different events and fights that are going on per the Boxing Commission. And as I said, it is a licensing function, so we certainly support that. But again, no new money there, just a transfer. The negative number of $2.6 million, well, almost $2.7 million is that transfer for the investigative program. So, you know, it's not really a cut, it's just a transfer of money. That's on line 42.4.5. And then that, just so you'll know, that includes 35 investigators, 45 motor vehicles, and the operating expenses that go along with that. On line 42.4.6, the negative 95,000 plus number, that reflects the transfer of the employee and operating costs for the Georgia Athletic and Entertainment Commission to PLB. And as I move to, I'm sorry, the rest is a statewide adjustment. And then as I move to PLB, on behalf of the 500,000 license holders in Georgia, we certainly appreciate the restored funding for the Professional Licensing Board. This will certainly allow us to be more efficient and to help continue to get folks quickly into the workforce as our economy starts to improve. On line 42.5.5, again, through the zero-based budget process that we went through, OPB determined a necessity for an increase of a little over $500,000 to help us fund additional operations at our licensing boards. These funds will allow for 5 dedicated professional licensing board call center positions. Also, this will help process and assist with complaint and compliance activities. There'll be an additional 5 people to help do that. And I would note that these recommendations are based on performance measures that we have provided to OPB during that zero-based budget process. And certainly one of the things that I think the governor's office and the legislature has asked all of state government to do in these tough times is really measure what we're doing every day. And we have been doing that for quite a while in the Secretary of State's office. So, you know, these numbers are based off of the numbers that we were giving them when you talk about number of complaints, our call volume, and really just our general workload at our licensing division and making just the everyday things we experience down there. The new positions call, as I mentioned, for 5 call center agents, 1 executive director, 2 licensor complaint and compliance analysts, and then we have some operating cost. We have also a position for 1 investigator and 1 board support specialist. And basically these new positions will help spread our workload out. As you all know, really since back in 2008 when the budgets were declining and our budget was declining as well, we have cut out really all of our middle management at the licensing division. Our executive directors are handling, 4, 5, 6, some even 7 boards, and this will help us spread that back out, not to where we were, but certainly just take a little workload off them so we can more quickly get people into the workforce. Handle one of our major complaints from the licensees, and that's that, hey, we've got people out there that are competing against us in the private sector that aren't licensed. We need you to go after them. We need you to process these complaints, and this will help us do that. On to line 42.5.6, there's an ad of a little over $670. This, as you well know, covers the cost of mandatory reporting, which is basically restoring the funding for the general operating expenses, which was covered by one-time monies in 2014. Mandatory reporting was implemented as a result of passage of HB 315, which is regarding nurses, and the implementation was required to be funded by the state. It was subject to funding. So last year we used one-time money to do this. This will be the operating expenses for this year. Line 42.5.7 of a little over $95,000. That is that transfer for the boxing commission, which was, that money was moved from administration to the licensing division. So this is not new money, just a transfer within the agency. The rest are statewide adjustments under the licensing division, and then last is our securities division. Very simple here, line 42.6.5, $121,000. This is basically restoring our general operating expenses, which again was covered by one-time money in 2014, and then the rest are statewide adjustments. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm glad to take any questions if you have them.
Chairman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions, more for general knowledge than the items in your budget. I noticed that you are advocating for a Super Tuesday primary for the southern states, and so I want, if you would, and if it's okay, Madam Chair, to comment on that. But there's another movement, a smaller movement taking place that I've been made aware of by local counties to caucus for their and choose their candidates that way, and that's a movement that seems to be going around our state. So a comparison of those two and how important the Super Tuesday effort is would be appreciated.
Well, thank you very much for that question. I've been very excited about our Super Tuesday proposal to do a regional primary, and as I've said, that doesn't always get reported. This is good for both sides of the aisle. As you all know, we have an open presidential election this year with no incumbent running, so we're going to need to pick nominees from the Republican side and the Democrat side. Our traditional process in Georgia per state law is that we have a separate presidential preference primary. That's also used as a special election date in the state, so if any of your local communities have issues that they want to put on the ballot or vacancies, they can also use that election day. And we've gotten a lot of press about our idea of going on March 1st, getting other southern states to go along with us to help entice the presidential candidates to pay attention to Georgia. As you all know, in the past, that has not always been the case, where we've been on the same day as other big states like New York or California, and we basically don't get paid attention to, or we have states that move ahead of us in the process. So I'm really excited about that. That's the current law that we have. To answer your question about the caucusing, I mean, I've heard that, but that'll take a change in state law to do that. And right at the moment, we're dealing with the law that we have to deal with, and I haven't heard a whole lot about that movement. I mean, I've heard a little bit, but I'd be glad to speak with you further or answer any other specific questions you might have.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, one further question. We heard last week from our Georgia Technology Authority about the importance of securing our data, and I imagine your office is one of the ones that has to be so active in that, and if you just could comment on that.
Yes, ma'am. You're exactly right, and that is something that we have worked really hard on, especially the last couple of years. As you know, the filing fees that we're generating and processing in our corporations division, in our securities division, and in our licensing division is tremendous. I mean, we're dealing with literally, over 500,000 people that we license and making, tens of thousands in our securities divisions, and then we do over 1 million corporate filings a year. So you can imagine the number of credit card transactions that we're doing. We have had experts working on our security that, quite honestly, was lacking. When I got to the office. So we have feel like we're in a very good spot right there. In today's world, that is ever changing, so we're continuing to have to battle that, but we feel like we've done a tremendous amount. It's something that Lori has worked a lot on. And then as far as the securing the elections data, we've done a tremendous amount of that as well. As you all know, we did a big 2-year project to go to a new statewide voter registration system that we just completed here several months ago. That system is working well. We are now in our own private data center. During the election, we have 24-hour monitoring on that system, where if anything fails, we have people there immediately to get the network back up. You can imagine if your network goes down, even during early voting or on election day, it can be, not a good thing. So we're very excited about that. Not only are we getting better service, and I feel like we're better protected now with the voter registration system being in the private data center, we're also saving money doing that. So that is one of the main objectives that I've had being Secretary of State, is trying to move our agency forward to be as efficient as we can from an IT perspective, and to try to provide more, use technology to provide more for less.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman Martin.
Mr. Secretary of State, thank you for being here. Madam Chairman, I have 30 seconds for this one. This was not a budget question, but I had a question of your office. I needed to find somebody last Friday, and we were able to get a call in to Mr. Harper in your office, and got a call back from one of the attorneys. It was a serious matter for a constituent, a citizen of the state of Georgia, where, and I'm going to use the name of the firm here because I think they need to be called out, and it's one of the reasons I want to do it here on the record. Fidelity Investments has had an individual's investment account locked out for over 6 weeks because of some sort of data flaw they have. I find it completely objectionable that they can't get there and find out. I mean, the stock market goes up, stock market goes down. If it's happening to one person, it's happening to more than one in Georgia. And I really appreciate the fact that you guys took an opportunity, and I know you've reached back out to the individual. I think they probably traded voicemails on Friday afternoon, but it's not, I don't think even under your purview. I think it's probably a federally regulated SEC company, but the fact that you guys are going to try to shake it loose, because again, if it's happening to one Georgian, it's happened to another, and when you can't get to the money that's yours, it's a big deal. So oftentimes we only complain about things that y'all do to us, and I want to thank you for things you did for Georgia last Friday.
Well, I appreciate that, and even at times when the feds may take a lead on something, as you all know, when Dodd-Frank passed, our workload increased in our securities division from having to deal with portfolios under $25 million to under $100 million. Of course, as you know, we didn't get any new federal money to deal with that. But our folks, we were really trying to build our securities division back up now. One of the things that we worked with the legislature and OPB on during the downturn was we really needed to revamp our securities division. So we took some pretty heavy cuts there to help meet and offset some of our budget cuts early in the, late in the Perdue administration and early in the Deal administration. And now as things are getting better, we're trying to build that back up. We've got a lot of new leadership over there. And even with a company as large as Fidelity or others, when the feds may have the regulatory role on that, we still have a role here in Georgia and are glad to weigh in. I mean, part of what we're doing is protecting Georgia consumers. People expect us to do that. Quite honestly, we would like to be doing more there, but we realize we've got to kind of work that agency back up as you guys can afford it, and the governor's office can afford it with all the things that you all are having to deal with as well.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. State Properties Commission. We're on page 21.
I'm starting at 9 o'clock.
Understood.
I'm sure you probably
Go for it. No, you're great. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Madam Chairman?
I'm well. How are you?
Members of the committee, I'm doing fairly good, getting over a little bit of a cold, but I'm doing better today. As you see, the State Property Commission budget is $1.75 million. This is all from rent collections from GBA. We have 14 positions, 13 of them are filled, and 75% of our budget goes to personal services. The rest of it goes for appraisals and title checks and things like that. So we run pretty lean right there. The building authority, our budget is $35.6 million. You can see that the OPB has eliminated or recommended the elimination of our treasury payment, which this year is $845,934. This money will be used to increase the contract we have with the Department of Public Safety for security here on the Hill. It's for 3 additional personnel for the bringing on of the OPB new building. The rest of it will be used. They're going to start looking at the mail that's mailed in here and running it through a screening process. So that'll be for mail workers, maintenance agreement for their x-rays and metal detectors, and some computer replacements. The balance of it goes to pay our statewide benefits. When y'all increase the benefits, you don't make an appropriation to us, so we have to come up with that money. So that will be used for that, and then a little bit of it will go to offset the increases that we're having in Georgia Power increases. We've been able to reduce our consumption of power by about 40% by doing upgrades and lighting systems and things like that. I can't lay that money in your hand, though, because rates keep going up and we're still about break even with it, but that's where we're at with that. We have 216 positions, 159 of them are filled. Let's see, our capital outlay, there are 3 requests in that. $5 million for MR&R. Our buildings, our average age is about 55 years old. It's a struggle to keep up some of the older ones, especially the judicial building and the agriculture building in number 2 Peachtree. One of our requests is $6.5 million to demo the archives building. That was a request last year that you approved, but the conference committee at the end gave us money to design the new judicial building down there, but they took the money for demo of archives, so we're hoping that you'll give us that so we can do that this year. And one big need we really need is the $1,425,000 in additional funds needed to replace the building access controls. We already have 2.5 of that money set aside for that, but we want to move to a proprietary system, or move from a proprietary to a non-proprietary, okay? Replace all our wiring, our readers, and our software. Basically, we've outgrown and worn out the system that we've got here. We have agencies all the time wanting to increase their securities. Folks like the Secretary of State's office, some federal law gets passed or something, and as you all know, we just live in a different world than we did a few years ago. So we're working with the Department of Public Safety to really tighten it down, but we're to the point that the system's overloaded and we desperately need this money. With that, Madam Chair, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
Any questions? You have none. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, our last agency of the morning is the State Board of Workers' Comp. Frank McKay, we're on page 29.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm Delise Brooks. I'm the Executive Director, and to the right of me is Mr. Tom Risco, our CFO. I wanted to start out by saying our Chairman McKay wanted to be here. He had prepared and planned to be here. called me last night and has a very high fever and simply is too ill to attend. So we are here and happy to answer any questions, and without any objection, I'd like to just dive into Section 49. Section 49.1 through 49.13 is statewide adjustments. 49.14, we're transferring $150,000 from one program to the other into personal services, and basically that is because we didn't take in as much revenue. We make money with copying, and we have a paperless system. That's how we process all of our claims, our workers' compensation claims. And because we didn't take in as much revenue, we're requesting to transfer that. On to 42.2, again, through 49.21 through 49.2.4 is statewide adjustments. 49.2.5 is to reduce payments to state treasury from $4,728,000 to $4,152,000, and 49.2.6 is that transfer of the $150,000. Happy to answer any questions.
Anyone? Chairman Pruitt.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to show my ignorance, but you're reducing the payment to the Office of State Treasurer because you took in less money? I mean, what? I don't understand the reduction from 4.7 to 4.1.
Sure. It's a very fair question. Payments to State Treasury, really for the board, started in 1992. And there's been periods of increase and periods of decrease depending on how the economy is doing. There's even been periods where we haven't paid any. Because how we're funded, we're not funded by state revenue dollars. We're funded by insurance companies and self-insured employers by assessments. This is really a way for the board to help the state. It's in some ways, I guess, for lack of a better term, a overhead fee that the board pays for services that are provided to the board that we're not otherwise billed for. Starting in 2009, after the 2008 downturn, that money started to keep increasing, where it got over $5 million. So our Chairman McKay, did ask OPB if we could reduce that, bring it back down as it has in the past since the economy is doing better.
And so what happens with the monies that you get to keep then?
You wanna?
Are you talking about the other funds?
I have no idea what I'm talking about, honestly, but I'm trying to figure out if you reduced it by $600,000 that you didn't give back to the state, and you asked to be able to keep that money. I'm just saying, what are you going to do with it? I guess is that a fair question?
Payment State Treasury.
Yeah.
Well, Payment State Treasury are funds that we assess for, but we do not keep that money. We transfer it over to Treasury. Period. The whole $4,700,000.
Okay. Okay.
We don't keep any money.
Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't understand. Who determines what that number is, and how do you determine what that number is going to be?
Well, really, OPB determines that number.
There's no formula for it or anything? It's just, today we feel this is good?
The way it was supposed to have been set up was when there's a downturn in the economy and the governor issues, say, a 3% across the board decrease for all the agencies. We went to OPB and the governor indicated that if you cut our budget, we have to cut the assessment. So it doesn't help the state. Actually, it hurts the state because that money's coming in many cases from outside the state. So they said, well, how can you help the state? How can you say if we're going to cut you 3%, what can we do to
If we add 3%, you bring in even more.
That's right.
Okay.
I'm talking set up a, if they set up a line item where we can assess for whatever our cut would have been on that 3%, we can assess for it and turn it and pay the state treasury and turn it over to the treasury.
Right.
So that we're not hurting the agency, we're not hurting the state, and we're actually helping the state. Well, that 3%, when OPB, of course, saw it, it's a method of bringing revenue in, and it's sort of increased to about 25%.
Okay.
And so we're trying to get it reduced.
And that money comes from?
Insurance companies and self-insured.
Which means it comes from businesses.
Right.
I got you. Okay. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
All right, it looks like you have no more questions unless, no, you don't.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
All right, members, we're going to have our next meeting on Thursday morning at 8 to hear a few more agencies. Correct. On Thursday at 8. Okay. Thank you. All right, meeting adjourned.